Alright, so here we are back for part 3. We are going to start talking about information in our presentation. So let me go ahead and switch over to this document. Okay, so here's the deal. Today we're going to be talking about data, we're going to be talking about information, and we're going to be talking about knowledge. Now, you're going to be a better researcher and you're going to be a better communicator if you understand where information comes from, how it gets transmitted, and eventually how it becomes organized. Before we get too far, though, I want to make sure you're aware of two basic definitions. Data means the individual facts, the statistics, or the items, or I'm going to even say the parts of information. Not actually is information, not yet, but is parts that lead up to information. And information itself is the knowledge that is communicated, that is transferred or received concerning a particular fact or circumstance. So data gets released, and when we pick it up, when it gets communicated to us, when we make some meaning out of it, that's when it becomes information. So, looking at those definitions, I want you to consider the following. Which of these do you think is information? Or do you think these are pieces of information at all? I mean, we've got a date here. We've got what looks like a temperature and a date and some very large 6.9 billion number. What are these and what are they information? Let's see. If you said yes, let me throw this out at you. This one right here is actually the date the Space Shuttle Columbia was lost during the re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. So if you said yes, I would say think again. Because this information was missing something. And what that information was missing was this part right there. I shouldn't even say what this information was missing. I should say what this data was missing was this information that really rounds out this, makes it meaningful. The word I like to use is context. Right? We were without the context here. And now that we've got the context, this number actually starts to make meaning. It makes sense. It's becoming information now that we have context. It's not quite there yet, but it's becoming information. Same thing with this one. Okay? Information has to have context to be understood. Right? You might call these bits of information or data, but you only have real information when you surround that data with context. So let's take a look at this one. What do you think? 128.6 degrees below Fahrenheit? That's got to be something really cold, right? If you guessed it was the coldest recorded temperature in Antarctica or in the world, then you're right. Now that we surround this data with context, it actually becomes meaningful, useful information. Okay? And let's take a look actually at this last one down here. That number should be familiar with a bunch of you. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not our national deficit. It's a huge number, but that's not our national deficit. For those of you who guessed that it was the number of people in the world as of midnight last night, according to our U.S. Bureau of Census, you'd be correct. And look at this number. By itself, it's just a number. We didn't know if it was money. We didn't know if it was people. We didn't know if it was, Mr. Connor's IQ. Oops, put that down. We didn't know. But now that we've got this context, this number makes a lot more sense. I mean, look, it's almost 7 billion. I mean, in fact, they're predicting that in April it will be 7 billion. Now that we've got these pieces of context, this data is closer to becoming information, and they could all be really interesting points of information to have conversations about. I want to move on just a little bit. I want you to remember, to be understood, data has to first be given context. Okay? It has to be given relevance to some larger unit, some more data. If you start piling data together, you can start making connections with it and sense out of it, and that connection becomes context, so it becomes actual information. A single piece of data has no meaning unless there, I'm going to fix this too, meaning unless there is context in which to understand it. So a single piece of data has no meaning unless there's context in which to understand it. So these things now make sense to us because we get the context. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a scenario. And we're going to see if we can figure this out. This is a hypothetical example. Suppose that a group of local scientists develop an interest in the apparent decrease in the number of monarch butterflies to appear in annual migrations to the Santa Cruz area in California. The only insect known to migrate. Large numbers of beautiful monarchs winter at some 300 sites in California, including Santa Cruz and other places. Now, this group of scientists, have developed two different hypotheses about what is the cause of this apparent decrease in the number of monarch butterflies. One is that they think there might be too much urban buildup in areas surrounding the wintering sites. More parking lots, taller buildings, fewer eucalyptus trees for the monarchs to nest in. And the second hypothesis says that there's less naturally occurring milkweed where monarchs stay in the summer months, and so that might be the issue. So the group decides to pursue this second hypothesis of looking at and counting and trying to collect data on the sites where the monarch butterflies go during the summer. They send scientists out there and students out there to collect data on how widely available milkweed plants are in that area, and they correlate this data with butterfly counts as at the wintering sites. But suppose they actually never go through the process of publishing. They never give interviews, they never get the word out about their research. Have they actually gone through the process of creating information? Or is it still data? And I would argue it's data. Even when surrounded by context, it's still data because it has to be transmitted before it becomes information. Now, transmission can take many different forms. I mean, let's think about those scientists. How could they have transmitted that information? I mean, scientists complete various stages of their research. They usually write up their findings for scholarly journals, right? The group or someone in the group might go through the process of actually, publishing a book or writing a chapter for a book. Could be an electronic book or hardcover book. The group might even be interviewed for a story in the local newspaper, right? Or there might be a reporter for a local television program who might come out. Someone making a documentary video actually might go through the process of being there and being a part of what they're doing and actually film. Oops, there's my video. I can't even see it. Oh, there it is. Film what's going on. And yes, you saw. It's quite possible that somebody might have written an article for a newspaper, or they might have made some type of a speech or maybe a presentation at a conference. Okay, or maybe somebody might even have gone through the process of creating a website. But these would have been all great ways to transmit that information. And that's the key. Transmission is the key. Transmission can take many forms, but that's what's actually going to make data become information, is when there's context and it is transmitted. Now, we know information can take many forms, but I want you to understand the next level of this. Knowledge is information that we've digested and we now understand. It is assembled from information resources. In connecting and analyzing and interpreting and finding patterns within pieces of information, knowledge helps us to build understanding. For the individual persons, right, knowledge involves both understanding and the ability to make use of the data and information to answer questions, solve problems, make decisions. So this knowledge is actually a skill that we build when we practice synthesizing and analyzing information. And while there's lots and lots and lots of data out there, it's really up to us to determine what information is the most valid and what we'd like to use and keep to make knowledge out of. And this can be tough, because I'm sure you've heard of the concept of sipping water out of a fire hose, right? It's sometimes so much information out there that it becomes information overload, and we have trouble really even retaining any of the information that's thrown at us. I'm sure you've been in a classroom before where a teacher has thrown out so much information you just could not even contain any of it. You walked out of the room and went, "Oh my goodness, what did I just hear?" Okay? Now, I want you to get a couple of things out of this, but one thing I want you to get is that information has two key aspects. There's the content, that's the message, that's what we're trying to get across, that's what we want people to leave with. And then there's the format. It's how we communicate this content. And we talked about there's lots of different ways. Sorry, I'm going to have to go back and click on these things. There's lots of different ways to transfer the message around and so forth and so on. And these can come in different formats, right? So for example, one of the formats that we're going to be dealing with is video, right? Because video is a format for how we can take data, turn it into information, manipulate that data for our own purposes, and to inform people's perspectives. That's going back to our question. But how does documentaries come into this? Oh,